6 months ago, I sold my Sony FX6 to try out the Nikon ZR and the Canon C50 to see if the grass was truly greener on the other side. It turns out, it's not. This is my return to the FX6. This is actually kind of perfect timing because I had to reshoot all of this B-roll, and the day I'm filming, Sony Cine just released the firmware update version 6 for the FX6, which has a ton of quality of life improvements and performance improvements. But I'll talk more about that in a minute. Just want to introduce myself if you're new here. My name is Johnny. I'm an adventure filmmaker based in Utah, and I have owned the FX6 for about 2 years now, but I did, as I mentioned at the beginning, get rid of it last year to try out some other cameras. So if you haven't seen my previous videos, I let go of the FX6 to try out the Nikon ZR. I was fortunate to get my hands on that camera before it came out and to help Nikon shoot some stuff. And it was great. It was a great camera. And then I wanted a little bit more, so I picked up the Canon C50. And that was also a great camera. The results were fantastic on all of them. And I talk about this time and time again. The results on cameras these days are incredible. The biggest thing is, as a creator, especially like myself as a solo creator, the camera has to be enjoyable to use and it has to not slow you down when you're using it. If it inspires you to pick it up and get out and film, then that is the most important thing. And that's why I'm back on the FX6 after trying out those different cameras. I don't notice too much quality difference between the three. RAW didn't really do enough for me to warrant the exponential prices that we have now for memory cards and hard drives. And this one's probably going to ruffle some feathers, but OpenGate, it didn't do it for me. In my opinion, it was blown way out of proportion. Now, I'm not really someone who shoots in vertical video, so, you know, take that as you will, but even still, it doesn't give you that much when you're cropping. The only thing that I noticed that was beneficial with OpenGate is I film a lot in anamorphic. So when you're fitting to a CinemaScope aspect ratio in a non-OpenGate sensor, you lose a little bit of the character on the edges that you see right here. But in an OpenGate sensor, you retain the sides and you just crop a little bit from the top and the bottom. But it wasn't a deal breaker. And the benefits of the FX6 and that user experience are what brought me back. All right, folks, quick intermission just to talk about this video's sponsor, which is Storyblocks. Now, Storyblocks has been incredible for me over the last few months as a solo creator. It's an all-in-one creative toolkit built to help us tell stronger stories through video. We've got high quality, and I want to really emphasize this, human-made stock library of video, music, sound effects, templates for whatever platform you use to edit, workflow enhancing tools all in one place, which enables you to finish your projects faster and meet those deadlines. We are constantly bombarded by AI generation these days, and this is one of the main reasons why I love Storyblocks, because everything is 100% human-made. Now, I spend a lot of time filming and editing and color grading, so the last thing I want to do is spend even more time when I want to create titles or subheadings for my videos. Something that Storyblocks has been great for me is all of the templates that they have. That they have a ton of templates for titles, animations that just make your life as a creator so much easier. And of course, as with any platform, you would expect music, and the music library is incredible, and it's all royalty-free with all of the licenses that you need for your next project. So if you want to enhance your storytelling capabilities and use the tools that I use, head to the link in the description, and for a limited time, Storyblocks are offering 15% off annual plans, so don't miss out on this incredible offer. All right, now back to the FX6. Internal NDs and the modular design. Those are the things that I love the most about the FX6. The internal NDs are incredible, especially because I use a ton of cinema lenses where I'm manually focusing and manually adjusting my aperture. The last thing I want to do is to worry about adjusting a neutral density filter at the same time. I'm a run and gun solo filmmaker, so I need to be locked in when I'm filming, and the less that I worry about, the better it is for me. And on the FX6, it's not just a built-in neutral density filter, it is a variable neutral density filter that you can set to adjust itself depending on your exposure compensation. So in S-Log3, I'm overexposing between 1.5 and 2 stops. I can tell the camera that that's my exposure compensation, and the variable neutral density filter will adjust itself automatically as it reads the scene. and I can set parameters on how quickly it's doing that to the point where it's basically like the human eye. If you're walking from a brightly lit room into a dimly lit hallway, your eye is going to slowly adjust. And I've been able to tweak the settings on the FX6 to kind of mimic that to a point where it's natural and not a jarring instant change in brightness. So that alone was pretty much what brought me back to the FX6. It spoiled every camera for me. Now you may look at the FX6 and think it's a bulky setup, but that's the beauty of this camera. It's modular. So we have a side handle, which is in my case right now, but I'll throw up some B-roll as I'm talking about this. And then we have a top handle and then the monitor. Now the monitor is a proprietary cable that plugs in right here. But what you can do is, and what I do, depending on the kind of situation that I'm filming in, I will take off this top handle, which is just 2 1/4-20 screws. My monitor's stuck. Take the monitor off the handle and it's got an adjustable, if you're unfamiliar, it has like an adjustable arm and that can change to different angles depending on where you're mounting it on the top handle. Now I have a tilter plate on my FX6, but it's basically the same footprint. I just have it just to add a little bit more weight because the FX6 is a very light camera. But on this plate and on the body of the camera itself, you have these special mounting points for the monitor. Now, if I want to be really discreet, I'll take my ZV-1, which is what I'm filming on right now. But more often than not, I'd rather take the FX6. So I'll just have it as this setup with the screen on top, and it literally is just right here, and I can fold it down, and this is it. I've got my 16:25, and it's not much bigger than an FX3. I have all my controls on this side to be able to access every menu, settings, my dual gain ISO, my digital zoom to check my focus if I want to do that, all just in this tiny package. And this is how I do all of my hard mounted stuff with the FX6. And it barely weighs more than an FX3. And if I'm fully rigging out this camera for all day filming, I talked about the tilter top plate that I have. I also have this V-mount battery plate from Tilter, and it just slots in and connects to those pins in the camera. And then you just use a little screw right here, and then you can attach a V-mount battery and that will power the camera. And then alongside that, I can plug in a monitor if I wanted to do that. And then obviously with that extra weight, I will use those handles. But it just gives so much flexibility depending on how you're filming. And as a solo filmmaker, I've talked about this before. Sometimes I want to be fully rigged out for all day filming. Sometimes I just want to bring it on a family adventure down to the aquarium. And I love the FX6 in those scenarios because of those neutral density filters that are built in. I'm not just going to glorify this camera without talking about some drawbacks, and these are some things that I hope we see in a replacement of the FX6, but I don't know if we're going to get that anytime soon. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, we did just get a major firmware update to the FX6 6 years later after this came out. So Sony is still caring about the FX6, and I don't think we'll see a direct replacement this year. So if you're considering buying one, but you're on the fence because there might be a replacement, I say don't worry about it. Just pick one up. There's plenty of good priced FX6s on the used market if you want to go that route. But speaking of drawbacks and what I wish we see in a replacement whenever that comes. Now, the FX6 itself has a scratch audio microphone, but it is terrible. I believe it's like right here, just this tiny little thing. It's worse than any other camera's built-in microphone. So it's not a good, it's not a good thing if you need audio. Which is a downside when I'm doing that super compact setup that I showed you, but more often than not, that's not when I want audio. The top handle does have a built-in microphone right here, which is actually surprisingly good. And when you use the top handle, you get access to 2 XLR inputs. Without this top handle, you have no access to good audio. It has one of those hot shoes on the top. I can't take this thing off because it's brand new and it's never come off before. There we go. It has a hot shoe, so you can connect microphones there, but there's no way without that handle to connect audio. There's no 3.5mm jack. There's no hot shoe on the camera itself. So that's something that I hope to see in the future. It would just make life a lot easier if the replacement FX6 has that. Right before I close out, I did put on my stories a few days ago that I was going to be doing this video. If anyone had any specific questions, then I would address them. So I'm going to do that right before I finish up. So Let's have a look. First question, if I had to have the FX6 or FX3, which would it be and why? I think I kind of covered that. I love the FX3, but I don't own one right now. I have the FX6 and the ZV-1, and I think that's a great pair for me because the FX6, it's flexible, I can have it small, I can rig it out, it's got internal NDs, and if I really need to be lightweight, then I have the ZV-1. It's way cheaper than the FX3. Granted, the FX6 is more expensive than the FX3, but you're paying for internal NDs and just an all-round better user experience, in my opinion. So if I had to choose between the 3 or the 6, it would be the 6 every day of the week. Lack of IBIS on minimal setups. I didn't talk about this in the video, and I didn't talk about it because I don't really think about it. I don't rely on image stabilization. I feel like I'm quite steady in how I film. And if you're using Sony lenses on the FX6, Sony Catalyst Browse can stabilize in post by reading the data from the connections on that Sony lens. So that's one consideration on a minimal setup, because rigging this camera out, it is very stable. When you bring it in close to the body, I feel that there's hardly any micro jitters. But yeah, on a minimal setup, it's obviously a lot lighter. I talked about the weight of this camera being significantly light. So I think that's the biggest thing that I would say. I'm not going to try and educate you, Benj, because you asked this question. I know you know what you're doing, but for general people, it's just practice. Run and gun guerrilla filmmaking environment, would you choose the FX6 or FX3? Kind of similar to the first question, FX6 every day. Why the FX6 versus the Nikon ZR? The ZR was just lacking a lot of things. It has a beautifully large screen, but there's no anamorphic D-squeeze, which I feel is wasted potential. It's not for everyone because not everyone films in anamorphic, but there was just a couple of other things. Ergonomics suck without having a cage, and I don't really like putting a cage on my cameras. And the file sizes are enormous. At the beginning, in the honeymoon period, I was like, it's fine, I'll just buy more memory cards and more storage. But now storage is like tripled almost overnight over the last couple of weeks. So there's no point anymore. Like, I'm just wasting storage for Red RAW or R3D NE, which is just not really much better than S-Log3. Usability in everyday life compared to smaller cameras. It's definitely less discreet than like the ZV-1 or the FX3, but as I showed you, earlier with that small setup with no handles, I can put it in a sling bag, and it's just another camera at the end of the day. If I want it this year but I need to save up, do I wait to see what Sony's next big release is? I touched on this earlier. Don't wait, just get it if you want it. Who knows what's happening, especially with like tariffs and stuff. I think camera manufacturers might be kind of slowing down, and as we've seen, Sony are investing R&D into firmware updates on the FX6, so I think it's here to stay for a while. If I had to pick only one lens, what would it be? That would be the Atlas Mercury 27mm, which I'm filming on right now. Absolutely incredible lens. Why wasn't the C50 enough? Similar to the ZR, it didn't have image stabilization, but it's also a much smaller camera. So it was a little bit more difficult for me to keep stable, and it didn't balance very nicely when I'm using anamorphic lenses. And that's another thing about the FX6, it balances so well with those heavier lenses. File sizes were also enormous, not as big as the ZR, but still rather large. There was something else about the C50. The C50 just, the menus just weren't intuitive. It just felt like it took me forever to go through things. Just little things that kind of added up that were kind of personal to me, so I won't really share those. How does the image quality of the FX6 hold up to other cameras? Oh my goodness. S-Log3, S-Cam at 3.cine, which is what I film in, it's incredible. I've barely noticed any difference between Canon RAW and the R3D NE. Like if I put them side by side, I don't really see any difference. I think the dynamic range is incredible, very capable. The dual gain ISO is fantastic, 12,800. I can confidently film at 12,800. Advantages of it over the FX3, touched on this, internal NDs, superior ergonomics. That's basically it. They're all kind of similar questions, and I don't really want to continue to repeat myself and bore you guys. So if there's any other questions that I haven't covered that you're burning to know, don't hesitate to drop a comment down below or reach out to me on Instagram. I appreciate you watching, and hopefully this has been kind of beneficial for you. All in all, if you're eyeing the FX6, I think it is a great buy for this year, for 2026. It's not outdated. As we've just seen, they've brought out a new firmware update, which I said I was going to talk about and I just forgot. So I'm going to quickly run down that firmware update real quick. So we now have the Big 6 menu on the FX6, which is what the Venice and the Burano have, I believe. They've made some minor adjustments to the layout when you're filming. The like icons, I'm looking at my screen, I don't know why I'm doing that, but like the settings on the screen are no longer overlaying the video itself. It's kind of cropped, it's kind of made it a little bit smaller, and it's already a small screen, so it's not that great, but they're now like not interfering. It's like a black bar around the preview, which is kind of nice. They've made autofocus improvements. I don't know the exact specifications, and I'm going to be trying that out this weekend. But that's pretty huge that they're able to do that via a firmware update. And then the biggest thing for some people is that it now records Blackmagic RAW when using a Blackmagic monitor and doing external recording. It's not something that I'm going to do because, as I mentioned, RAW files are enormous, but it's still great that we now have an option for not only ProRes RAW, which was already available, but now Blackmagic RAW, which is pretty significant. That's it. I'll see you next time.